Okay, so now we are going to start our business meeting. I'd like to call to order the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education. It is Tuesday, June 7th, 2022, and we're meeting in a blended format with some of us at Casco Bay High School and others joining via Zoom. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam Chair. Ms. Bondo, Mr. Burke.
Here.
Ms. Russell Better.
Here.
Ms. Biliu.
Here.
Mr. Youssef.
Here.
And Ms. Ellis.
Here.
Ms. Aslami. Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Alzamili.
Here.
Ms. Santiago.
Here.
Ms. Diu.
Here.
And Chair Figdor.
Here. I want to invite you to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Portland Public Schools recognizes the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. The Wolastoqiyik, or Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki Confederacy, or people of the Dawnland. We are honored to have Wabanaki children among our students today, and as a district, we are committed to making the past, present, and future of Wabanaki peoples visible in our schools and our classroom. Okay, with that, we are going to turn to public comment. So the public is invited to address the board for 3 minutes on any issue on which we're not voting on tonight. And in fact, we're not taking any votes tonight other than on our public comments. So if you are interested, please either come to the front, and I see Elizabeth Capone. So I'm going to start with her. If you're joining us remotely and you would like to address the board, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom and start with your name and address, and you'll have 3 minutes. And Liz, please go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Capone Newton. My family name's Capone Enriquez. Some of you know me like that. I live on Tucker Avenue in Portland, the Riverton neighborhood. I'm appreciative of the conversation tonight. I came here to thank some staff for their role in basketball, but I'm going to choose to make comments about ideas about the future that we want to have, that we want to build together. I appreciated Councilor Burke, School Board Member Burke, mentioning the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and would like to remind everybody that Dr. King was assassinated when he kicked off the Poor People's Campaign, which was the uniting of white and Asian and Hispanic and Black and Native American poor people across the United States. And I think that's relevant to the conversation tonight. I have the privilege of having gone to study public health at Columbia University. That's something Chair Figdor and I have in common. And I studied under many people, but the most impactful person I studied under was Mindy Fullilove, who's a Black psychiatrist who studied how Black communities were devastated by she studied many things, but including how Black communities were devastated by highways being built through their neighborhoods and how it damaged the social cohesion of how people survived. And the reason why I lift up Mindy Fullilove tonight in the context of ideas about the future that we want to build together is what Mindy taught me when I was in public health school and I would ask about racial disparities. And what Mindy would say is that, yes, it is awful that people of color, and especially Black people, and sometimes Native Americans especially as well, and sometimes Latino people especially as well, have disparities across many aspects of health. And we could also add education to that. It's awful. And she would say, Elizabeth, Is it that you want people to be uninsured just as much as poor white people? What is the right percentage of people to be uninsured? What is the right percentage of people to not have access to healthcare? And we could ask the same thing about education. So I would say, oh, okay, I get it. As in, what we want is a future that talks about universal rights and what we are all invested in. And we can acknowledge the disparities, and we must. And these disparities are super unfair. And we can also invite white people who are struggling with poverty and struggling with homelessness and struggling with unfair school discipline. We can invite them in to both their self-interest and their collective interest in fighting this fight. And you know why we do that? Is it because all of them are nice? No. Boy, do we know that. No, it's because we're stronger together. We are literally more people. Right? It adds up to more people when we include struggling white people in our vision for the future that we want. It's not all white people. It's certainly, I mean, I went to my first anti-racism training when I was 12, and the anti-racism.
Liz, would you like another minute?
Yeah, thank you. And I'll wrap up. Thank you. The anti-racism that I was taught, I will tell you from my perspective as a 40-year-old now, it's, you know, we have to know how to invite people in to what's relevant to them. This is not about guilt. It's not about hand wringing. And it's certainly not about thinking that individual people of color in leadership positions can do no wrong. It's definitely not about that. And sometimes these are the perceptions that white people walk away with and people of color walk away with when they go to an anti-racism training. And this is very dangerous for our work together as a community. Leadership, whoever's in it, especially if there's tokenism involved, leadership has to be held accountable. I appreciate being able to wrap up. Transformative justice is the last thing I want to say. You know, I hope that you all look into that beyond restorative justice, there is a sense of transformative justice. As a public health person, we focus on prevention. And this is very important because it's the idea that we want to change the system. We don't want to just have this happen again and again and again, right? We want to understand and we want to change. And transformative justice is a model for making change that I hope that you'll look into. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Liz. Appreciate your being here tonight. Is there anyone who is remote who would like to address the board? Don't see any hands who are remote, so of our attendees who are remote. So I'm going to go to our next.
I'm Julianne Opperman on Woodmont Street in Portland. I've been an educator or a student for all of my life. And what you all talked about is not new. And it is painful. Peace only grows when there are respectful relationships and they're maintained. Problem in education has been the shot in the arm, quick fix, figure it out, move on. And what you're working on is incredibly important, but please look to it 5, 10, 15 years, because teachers will change, students will change. And as it comes through, it's important. The other thing is, as you suggested, Mr. Burke, the modeling of behavior, whether it's restorative or transformative, is important. And the pain that we get from negative experiences, and I know exactly what you're talking about because I had a conversation with a 35-year-old man who experienced that kind of situation in Portland schools years ago. It's critically important that those things are mended, and I would look to seeing how that might happen in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's a person who is now in a position of power goes and confronts that person respectfully and says, this is what happened, because some of these people don't know what they've said or done. I will close.
Thank you so much, Julianne. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to address the board? I see one hand up, and it is Mr. Rodriguez. Roberto, please go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. I had, so my name is Roberto Rodriguez. I live in North Deering. As you, many of you, of course, know, I'm the city councilor. Kind of sat here and I very interestingly listened to the presentation and enjoyed a lot of the comments. Really happy to see Tim Wilson there involved with our students. Don't really have very much to say. I've had an opportunity to talk with many of you individually and sat on the board for 5 years and had many opportunities to speak on this issue. I will proudly and borderline arrogantly say that I'm probably one of the first board members to consistently bring up these disparities and urge the district to start to look into this data. It's very unfortunate that Portland Public Schools has a history of very poor data collection. And so when I first asked us to start looking at this, there was not a lot of historical information for us to guide our decision making. So the only reason that I'm bringing this up, and why I've decided to highlight this comment tonight, is just to try to bring a sense of positive or to highlight something positive, and that at the very least we should commend ourselves in that we're having these conversations. And just 5 years ago, just 5 years, that's 2016, 7 years ago, I could not have imagined the board spending this much time on these issues. So we have a sense of transparency now that we should be proud of. There's a sense of urgency that I think is clear and should be applauded. And I think, like I said, at the very least, we're becoming aware of these issues at a global level and at the point where decisions are made. So I just want the district to know that's a positive note and that we should be proud of that. And then the last thing that I want to say is tonight, the night of the year where you have your retirement ceremony was always one of my favorite evenings to be on the school board. And I did catch some of the ceremony today. So I wanted to end just by thanking the many educators that retired this year. And it's not lost on me the challenges with which many of these careers came to an end. But yet the contributions of so many of these people in our schools, in our families, in our communities are incredibly impactful. And, I'm always impressed by the quality of educators that Portland Public Schools has had. And so, again, thank you to everyone who was announced to have retired today, and thank you for everything you've done for our community. That's all I have for tonight.
Mr. Rodriguez, you clearly are quite skilled and at this, since you finished with exactly 0 seconds left. We all really appreciate, I know, hearing from you again. Thank you for your service on the City Council. And I do not see any other hands up, and there's no one else in our audience tonight. So just one more time, if there's anyone else who would like to address the board, please let us know by using the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Okay, I don't see anyone else, so I'm going to close public comment. And
I've got just one comment. It's just a question about how the school board handled removing the masking in school again, and how no one I knew about that until the day of.
we're going to get to that when the superintendent does his report, and we'll do an update on school reopening.
Okay.
Do you mind if we wait until that portion of the agenda?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to move to the report of the chair. I first wanted to congratulate our 2022 graduates. The 2022 graduates that I know personally fill me with awe and hope. COVID defined their high school experience, but they did not let it define them. Instead, some, like former student board member Emily Chung, now a Deering graduate, have already accomplished truly remarkable things. Emily and 3 other Portland Public Schools graduates were on the front page of the Maine Sunday Telegram just this past Sunday. And this class has big plans and dreams, and I want to congratulate again the graduates. We are rooting for you, and we are so very proud of you. Additional congratulations are in order, but of a different nature. I wanted to congratulate board member Yusuf on his marriage. Congratulations, Yusuf. I wish you so much joy and happiness. Lastly, I want to encourage everyone to please go vote. Polls are open at City Hall tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Myrtle Street entrance, and on Thursday from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. at the same location. Election day is next Tuesday, 1 week from today, and the polls are open as usual in Portland from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. There are 12 candidates running for 3 school board seats, 2 at-large seats that are open because Ms. Trevorrow and Mr. Rodriguez resigned from the school board last December to join the city council, and the District 5 seat has been open since last September. The 12 candidates differ greatly in their goals and perspectives, so please get out to vote. The school budget for the upcoming year is also on the ballot. It's a lean budget, but one that allows us to continue our equity work and not backslide. So please get out to vote either this week at City Hall or next Tuesday on Election Day. That's the end of my remarks. Now we're going to move to the report of the students. And tonight we're going to hear from Mr. Alzamili of Portland High School. Mr. Alzamili.
At the end of April, we held our National Honors Society inductions and book awards on the same night. Colleges such as Yale and Harvard recognized students' excellence. In May, we had our AP exams, NWEAs, and MEAs back-to-back, which meant a pretty rigorous exam season for juniors. Also in May, we celebrated the Make It Happen program. We recognized the Seal of Biliteracy, and Shakespeare Club performed Much Ado About Nothing. We also had band, chorus, and orchestra perform their spring concert. We've recently had our senior farewell, the first time I personally attended one, as the pandemic interrupted my freshman year. Many awards were handed out and students' achievements over their 4 years at PHS were recognized. The valedictorian for the class of 2022, George Thiel, is our first student in 11 years to attend the U.S. Naval Academy. Graduation, well, that already happened, was June 1st at Merrill Auditorium. And we're wishing our seniors well as they realize their futures.
Thank you so much. Okay, next we are moving to the report of the superintendent. Mr. Superintendent, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Good job, Abdullah, with your report. This year's, I'm sorry, I lost my place. I want to begin my report today by reiterating my deepest condolences to the families and friends of the victims of the Robb School in Uvalde, Texas. That event was one more assault on our dignity, our sanity, and our humanity, perpetrated by an unhealthy and alienated young man who was able to obtain weapons to carry out his misguided attack with little oversight. How can that be? How can we as a society say that we care about school safety when it's so easy to obtain the means to follow through on evil intent? The Robb School had all of the precautions that are recommended to prevent these types of tragedies, and yet it happened to them. I take this opportunity today to echo the words of the board's 2018 resolution against gun violence and call upon the United States Congress and state legislatures, including the Maine legislature, to prioritize the protection of students and school system employees by passing legislation that more effectively regulates access to firearms. through measures such as closing loopholes and background checks and improving reporting of lost and stolen weapons in the interest of public safety. Also funding public health research on firearms related issues, and most importantly, advancing mental health supports. This is our last week of classes for the 2021-2022 school year. Our last student day is next Tuesday, June 14th, and our last teacher day is Wednesday, June 15th. I think it goes without saying that this has been an incredibly difficult year for everyone, students, staff, families, and the board. I hope that everyone will be able to take time off this summer to recharge and renew themselves as we look forward to what will hopefully be a very different year when we resume classes in September. Speaking of recharging and renewing, last week we celebrated graduations at 3 of our high schools, Portland, Deering, and Casco Bay. It was renewing and recharging to be with all of our students and families as they celebrated the culmination of 12 or more years of schooling to reach that point in their lives. As always, for the educators, this is such a significant moment, as every student who walks across the stage is a tribute to the work that we do. Our almost 500 graduates will go on to do amazing things in every field and walk of life, and I'm proud of and grateful for all that our Portland Public Schools people have done to contribute to the milestone that is high school graduation. Staying with the renewal and recharge theme, I'm happy to report that with the return of the Portland Pride Parade this year, Portland Public Schools will renew its commitment to asserting our dedication to celebrating and making visible the contributions and identities of LGBTQ+ staff, students, and partners. We will once again have a float entry in the parade. I will say it's a previous best themed float winner, so I think it has a good chance of repeating. And I invite board members, staff, students, and others to join us marching on Saturday, June 18th, starting at 1 p.m. from somewhere in the Monument Square area. Look for the yellow school bus. I would like to thank Executive Director of Communication and Community Partnerships, Grace Valenzuela, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, Barrett Wilkinson, and our Executive Assistant, Janet DeVias, for all of their detailed groundwork that goes into organizing and communicating about this event. Happy Pride Month to all of our staff, students, and families. I would like to announce that Food Services Director Jane McLucas was selected to lead school nutrition at the Maine Department of Education. She will begin there on July 1st. We will be looking to replace her between now and then. And this is a bittersweet moment since Jane has done incredible work to make school meals accessible and desirable for our students and has proven to be an enthusiastic and tireless partner and advocate. She will be hard to replace, but I am happy for Jane and believe that it would be good for Maine to have someone with her qualifications, vision, and energy at the state level. So please join me in thanking Jane and congratulating her on this important career step. Finally, in closing this section of my remarks, voters will be going to the polls a week from today to vote on the district's FY23 budget. We've worked hard over the past 6 months to bring forward a responsible budget that balances the needs of the district and the economic realities that we're all facing. Our $133 million budget represents an increase that is considerably below the rate of inflation for this past year. I encourage everyone to understand our financial requests and to turn out to vote on June 14th. Next, I would like to begin a regular update on how we are working to keep our schools open and our staff and students healthy, as we've been doing for 2 full school years.
Mr. Superintendent,
Yes.
there's a comment from Board Member Burke.
Sorry.
Just before we shift into the reopening update, I just want to take the opportunity to remark about Jane McLucas, who was Portland's first female food service director and has been outstanding. To my understanding, that's true, and has been outstanding in what she did throughout the pandemic and helping, working with her staff to do and being on the ground herself to do, bringing forth, daily hot vegan meal options, piloting culturally relevant meal options, just was a real trailblazer. And I'm deeply grateful that she's been with us. And like you, I am looking forward to her being at the state. I think that will be good for the state. and I'll look for other ways to send my gratitude to Jane directly. But I just wanted to echo the impact that she's had and that I've seen her have. And I think being one of the state's largest restaurants, she goes under the radar nonetheless.
Thank you for acknowledging her.
Thank you so much, Board Member Burke. If I might say something as well. I just wanted to acknowledge that I forgot to say Happy Pride as a queer woman, and I am so sorry for the tremendous oversight. I jumped into Pride on June 1st, and I feel like, I don't know, it happened months ago because Pride is such a time to celebrate, and I just want to acknowledge all of our brave and courageous students, and I thank you for being true to yourself, and we look forward to helping to support you in our schools. So thank you, Mr. Superintendent, and sorry for taking your time.
No, not at all. So I'm going to begin our our update on how we are reopening schools and maintaining them safe. We've been doing this now for 2 full school years, and I am hoping that this will be our last school reopening update. So based on advice from, this is directly to Mr. Alzamili's question, based on advice from our medical advisors, we made masks optional a week ago today. This was in response to evidence that COVID prevalence in the community was decreasing and that it was doing so in our schools as well. Since then, Cumberland County's risk was downgraded to green. It was yellow at that point in time when we made the decision, and the wastewater incidence has also continued to drop. We continue to urge the use of masks by all, and especially by those who are unvaccinated, have medical reasons, or live with those who may have medical reasons in order to reduce their exposure to the virus. Just to be specific about it, we review the data when it's available. It was available on Thursday, so we made the decision with our medical team on Friday. Because this was a situation where all we were saying is like, you can go or you can keep it on, and we were actually urging people to keep it on. We didn't feel like we needed to have a ton of communication around it. So we communicated it the way that we do, which is not ideal, which was to put it on our, that was a week that we had our community newsletter. So it went out in the community newsletter. We do a weekly COVID update. It went out in the weekly COVID update. We put it on our, on our social media pages and things along those lines. And we obviously communicated it to our staff so that they would know on Tuesday, because we had the holiday, on Tuesday when people came back to say like, oh, you don't really need to wear that anymore. It's optional. So when we transitioned to having masks on, we had a longer window. So we made the decision the same way on a Friday, but we said it's going to be implemented the next Thursday because we knew that we had to do some re-education. We had to restock. We had to do all of those things. In this particular case, because it was just simply like, we'd want you to keep your mask on, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. That's why we didn't have the same level of, weight and communication. We just went straight for it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
So I also want to stress, in addition to the fact that we still want people to wear masks wherever possible, that we also want to stress the importance of continuing to monitor ourselves for symptoms of COVID as we wind down the school year. So please continue to inform our nurses if you suspect you may have come down with COVID, and they will help you to understand the timing and options for testing and quarantine. This past week, partly as a result of COVID cases, we had a couple of instances of insufficient staffing to fully run school programming. As a result, we went remote for 4 days last week at Talbot Community Schools' Functional Life Skills Elementary Program known as Bridge. What we did is 2 days, the kindergarten through second grade classroom was affected, and then the 3 through 5 classroom was affected the other 2 days. On Friday, we also went remote for 8th grade at Lincoln Middle School, and this enabled us to redeploy some of the support staff that are assigned to the 8th grade to other grades at Lincoln, and we were able to adequately staff those two remaining grades. Our last round of pool testing was in mid-May. The Maine DOE and CDC recommend frequent rapid testing as an alternative to pool testing. And since the discontinuation of pool testing, we've been distributing up to 6 tests that were made available per student and staff member to members of our school communities. Last week, the Maine DOE and CDC announced that they will allow the COVID protocol standard operating procedures document, which has been governing the way that we manage reporting and many of the steps in our process. They're going to allow that to sunset on June 30th. And at that time, they'll also stop updating and publishing their data dashboards. We'll be following suit. Our last weekly COVID update will be this coming Friday, June 10th. We will not do weekly updates during summer school, and if current conditions hold, we hope to not resume those reports next school year. This, as I mentioned at the start, will also be the final school reopening update as a regular feature at our board meetings. Of course, should the conditions change, we will resume appropriate communication to ensure that you, staff, students, and the general public have the necessary information. Next, we're going to review our data dashboard. Again, hopefully this is the last time that we subject you to this, but here we go with our data for the week. I don't have this, so just I'm going to be seeing it when you move. So when you move is when I'll know what we're talking about next. First, student attendance, if you can back up to 1. You can see our student attendance has, at the elementary level, has stayed fairly consistent. We've had very spotty changes in attendance. Traditionally, our middle school attendance is significantly higher than our high school. There's a couple places where the middle school attendance dipped down below our high school attendance, mostly unrelated to COVID and more related to the protests that we discussed earlier. So that's our student attendance. Our staff attendance continues to show the same, trend that we've seen over the past few months, which is, spikes in absences. This actually represents absences as opposed to attendance is the percent absent, with peaks on either end of the week. But there's a discernible pattern, but there isn't anything that we find specifically to be COVID related. And overall, those trends have not changed substantially from, after the Omicron, influx back in January and early February. In terms of what we track in COVID prevalence is compare ourselves to the community. We also look at homerooms and look at grade level to see if there are patterns of data that should be concerning. You can see that we experienced an overall decrease in cases, have seen those cases decreasing, and in no situation do we have any grade that is sort of significantly elevated and has been that way consistently, which would lead us to believe that it has something to do with that particular grade level of students or something along those lines. So we don't have anything that is alarming there. Next slide. This shows the prevalence of cases in the school district and compares it to in the community. And you can see, again, that trend that led to going from red to yellow to eventually green, which is just a consistent decrease in the number of cases at the community level. And I can't really see why we don't have our data there. So Next slide. This is our total student cases. So you can see that we've seen a significant drop in the number of student-based cases from 112 to 29 in the last week of reporting. Next slide, please. And then this is the homeroom analysis. We started this using the pool testing results the first week that we don't have, or the first report that we do that doesn't have pool testing results attached to it. So this is just the number of cases that were reported to nurses through, either identified in school or at home reported to nurses. And you can see that there are a total of 18 cases. Only one has 2 or more students, and 2 of them were consecutive cases, and none of them are trending up. We don't have any with 5, and none of them are trending up. And I think that's all we have for the data. So any questions that you might have on our COVID update?
Are there any questions from the board? I don't see any, Mr. Superintendent.
Great.
All right.
That concludes my report then.
Thank you so much for your report. Now we are on to the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the meeting minutes of the May 17th, 2022 board meeting. Is there a motion? Ms. Bilyeu, seconded by Mr. Youssef. All right. Are there any questions on the motion? Those are meeting minutes from our last meeting. Seeing none, I'm going to move to public comment. So this is public comment specifically on our meeting minutes from our last meeting on May 17th, 2022. I don't see any public comment, so I'm going to close public comment and move to board discussion. Is there any board discussion on our meeting minutes from our May 17th, 2022 meeting? Seeing none, by roll call vote, please indicate whether you support approving the meeting minutes from our May 17th meeting. Mr. Superintendent, will you please call the roll?
As Chair, Mr. Burke,
Yes.
Ms. Russell Better,
Yes.
Ms. Bilyeu,
Yes.
Mr. Youssef,
Yes.
Ms. Ellis,
Yes.
Mr. Al-Zamili,
Yes.
Ms. Diu,
Yes.
and Chair Figdor.
Yes, so the motion passes unanimously with the students voting with the majority, and the meeting minutes are approved. Next, we are on to consent items. Mr. Superintendent, will you please speak to this agenda item?
Yes, Madam Chair. Under Board Policy KCD, the school board accepts by unanimous consent contributions made to the school district. As required by that policy, all of the donations are listed in the board agenda under this item. Our practice is for each donor to receive a written contribution, acknowledgement expressing our heartfelt gratitude as well as for their tax purposes. I would like to thank generous contributors to the Portland Public Schools who have made donations of durable goods, goods of substantial value, and historical or commemorative significance, which in this case is the district office having received garden flowers from the Home Depot of South Portland. And as always, we thank our contributors for their generosity and support.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Now we're on to new business. First read of the superintendent's request to utilize funds from the board's contingency line to underwrite consulting support in response to the middle school protests. Mr. Superintendent, did you want to speak to this tonight or?
Just briefly, there are some expenses associated with the work that we're trying to do as we close out the year. And so my intent in bringing this forward is to, in essence, to give the board an opportunity to provide the resources needed to be able to advance that work. The contingency fund, and we'll talk about this in more detail at the next meeting, the contingency fund is the board's reserves to be used for the purposes of unexpected things that come up. And so, I think that that's the spirit in which we're bringing this to the board, for action.
Thank you. Yes, board member Burke, go ahead, please.
Just like procedurally, there's nothing uploaded in board docs to
Because
look
I
at.
don't have anything. And
Oh, there's no memo or
it's a
anything?
first read, and I just didn't get it done, and I will definitely have it for the second read.
I just wanted to give the superintendent an opportunity to preview it, since it's a new agenda item.
Okay.
But yeah, typically at first read, we just actually read the motion.
Or we sometimes do a workshop around it, but
Yes.
we just did not do a workshop around it.
Okay. So that is it for our agenda tonight. We are about to adjourn. I want to remind everyone that next Tuesday, the 14th, is Election Day. And our next meeting is the following Tuesday, the 21st at 6 p.m. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Ms. Billiou, seconded by Board Member Burke. All in favor, just with a show of hands. It's unanimous, and we are adjourned at 9:13 p.m. Thank you so much, everyone, for your work tonight.